And then I will ask the Secretariat, maybe the video's off, so we have the panelists only on video. Okay. Hello, everyone. We're going to start in a minute as we let the participants come in. We'll start just in under 1 minute. If I can ask the Secretariat to go into speaker mode.
Yep, done.
Right now we're seeing the banner. Okay. Okay. Well, we're still waiting for one of the speakers, but I believe we are going to start. Not yet, Secretariat. If you can just go to speaker mode, not the biographies mode. There you go. So we're about to start. Sorry for the delay in starting this meeting. We're having some technical issues. I want to thank everybody. So good evening, good afternoon, and in some cases, good morning for joining us. I'm Pedro de Vasconcelos. I'm the manager of the financing facility for remittances at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and I will be your host for this event. I first would like to wish everyone a very happy new year, in the hope that 2021 will bring us a better situation than what 2020 was, or better had planned for us. So I'm delighted to have you here. Before introducing the panelists for the discussion today, I just want to give some background information and also some house rules in regard on how this meeting will be held. So for now, we will ask everyone if it's possible to ensure, in order to ensure a good connectivity, if they can have their videos off, except for the speakers. And we will then invite everyone at the Q&A session to come forward to turn on their video and ask their questions. But for the time being, just to make sure that we have the good bandwidth to turn off your videos. So let me start by saying that following the successful launch of this series of virtual global forums on remittances, investment and development, or in short, eGFRID, in December last year, I'm happy to announce this first session of events under the eGFRID track Remittance Families. There's going to be 3 tracks of that, and each of having several sessions that will go for the months. And I will go into this, but first, maybe as per usual practice, I would like to remind you that this meeting will be recorded because many of you said that they could not make it today. So for later viewing by the GFRID audience that could not join, we will have this on the website, so they will be able to see what was said and the examples that were shared. As per agenda, we will have a panel discussion for the first hour, to be followed by a Q&A session where we will take questions from the audience, as I mentioned, with some of the stakeholders to be able to take the floor with their videos on at that moment. For the reminder of the event, also I will kindly ask you to mute your microphones if it's possible, just to avoid conflicting sounds with the questions. Before introducing our distinguished guests, I would like to say a few words about the GFRID process, since some of you might not be acquainted with its nature, objectives, and goal, as well as the core aspects of the upcoming discussion and sessions based on the findings and recommendations made by the Remittances Community Task Force. As a reminder, I would like to mention that this task force, this Remittance Community Task Force, was created in March last year in an attempt to understand the impact of the crisis and to share information and practices to adequately support and advise stakeholders on effective response to the crisis. This outcome of this 40 organization strong group across sectors has led to the issuance of measures now depicted in the blueprint for action. It's said these 19 measures address remittance families, the private sector engaged in remittances, as well as the public sector in enabling and in the enabling environment surrounding the remittances market. The uptake of these measures by several global processes like the financing for development, also the G20 has now led to the need to move from strategic dialogue to implementation guidance. This is what is crucially needed. And it's towards that purpose that a series of events have been planned with key stakeholders working in this arena, with whom we hope to bring further information on how to ensure that these measures can be implemented around the world where remittances count the most. So the session today, on today's track, will focus on remittance families. As a reminder, the other two will be on the private sector, and specifically the remittances market, and the third one on enabling environment. This will happen next week. And if you have not registered, we will kindly ask you to do so in order to make sure that you get the right link. So joined by distinguished guests, we will address 3 rounds of questions today in this dialogue. The first one will be the reality of remittance families, including both senders and recipients, and particularly regarding both financial capacity and capability of this. The second point or round of questions and answers or discussion points will be to highlight some examples of successful innovative linkages between remittances and financial inclusion through any means, including mobile, and specifically those products such as savings, credit, and insurance, among others, that can be promoted by the sector and addressing remittance family needs particularly. And finally, what aspects need to be put in place towards scaling these examples or these best practices, and the role of both private and public sector should play, again, to ensure that the needs of migrant families, remittance families as we call them, are addressed. So to help us address this, we have put together a panel of experts in these fields. You see them on top of your screen, with the majority of them being part of the Remittances Community Task Force to help us start this process that will continue in the months to come and leading to the eGFRID Summit this coming June. The summit will happen, it will be virtual, however, but it will happen on 16, 17, and 18 of June, plans a date to be defined. I'm therefore very proud to introduce this all-women panel. We had an all-men panel last time. I'm very proud this time we have an all-women panel, and it's my pleasure to introduce. I would like to introduce each of them. Marina Menke, she's the head of labor mobility and human development at the International Organization for Migration, IOM, by managing a global network of specialists working on labor mobility and human development in IOM HQ and regional offices as well. Marina assists in the organization and its partners from other UN agencies, governments, private sectors, civil society in development strategies and effective solutions. Marina, correct me, but you do so much. The labor migration, human mobility facilitation, diaspora, also a lot of work on that, and transnational community collaboration, and financial and socioeconomic empowerment of migrants, communities, and broader migration and human development. Very enriched background of expertise that IOM can bring to the table, and we will hear from Marina. We also have Nikki Kettles. She's executive manager of programs at Finmark Trust. She's a digital payment expert and a financial inclusion specialist with an extensive experience in corporates. In addition, as Finmark Trust, head of Southern African Development Community Financial Inclusion, she managed the strategic development and implementation of regional and country financial inclusion strategies to support the vision of making financial markets work for the poor. Nikki has a lot of experience, and I'm sure you will be finding very insightful on the examples that Nikki will bring to bear on the reality of this past year, particularly in that part of the region. We also have Marie-Chantal Ouitonze. She's founder and president of the African Diaspora Network in Europe, or as we call it, ADNE. an umbrella organization of African diaspora in Europe, whose primary objective is basically to assist members, organizations, associations, enterprises, and migrants and individuals as well, to engage with policymakers on issues of common interest to Europe and, of course, in Africa. She's also the CEO of MACH Consulting, a Brussels-based consulting firm specializing in EU-Africa and ACP-EU relations, development cooperation, project management, business and communication. She's been very involved lately with the public sector and diasporas in regards to what has happened to the community, and I hope within this dialogue she will be able to share not only the findings, the issues as well, and help us create better guidance to how certain measures can be implemented. We also, last but not least, joined by Alina Sevatoryov. She's the director of the non-banking credit department at the National Commission for the Financial Market of Moldova, or known as NCFM, which is the regulator and supervisor of the whole non-banking financial market of the country. NCFM is a partner of eGFRID with a grant agreement that we jointly have of a project called Supporting the eGFRID Rural Resilient Projects in Moldova, development of capacity building of the savings and credit associations. We have a little video today that we will show you about that, but it's a very timing example that Alina, as a project manager, will be able to bring forward. So without further ado, I would like to kickstart this first meeting and set the first set of discussion points. A lot has been said about the reality of remittance families during this pandemic, the ability for some remittance senders to maintain their sending patterns, others unfortunately not. As you know, they contribute to two economies for migrants or being senders, and this pandemic has not only tested their resolve, but also particularly their resilience. And what seemed to be a major decline was nevertheless proven to once more to show that the dedication that migrants have, millions of migrants have with their families, the social contract that exists with their families is stronger than ever. This is not the first crisis that is being monitored in terms of remittances or migrants sending money home. I personally witnessed 3 of them since 2000, and every single time we were surprised about the resilience of both migrant and the recipients on this social contract personalized by remittances. So this is what we're going to address. We know that a lot of these factors affecting the sending of and receiving of remittances have been caused by, of course, the pandemic, the after effects as unemployment, but nevertheless, we will be happy to share some examples that change the prognostics of what was expected in terms of reduction of flows of remittances, and again, the resilience. This is in some way included in this blueprint for action that addresses the challenges faced by the migrants who send remittances and their family members who receive them back home. It's again been a collaborative effort among the remittances community task force. It addresses the regulatory environment. It also tries to provide information and guidance on incentivize better business practices and changes among the remittances industry. And lastly, also introduce transformative change among customer behaviors for those that send and receive remittances. And this is particularly what this panel today will try to do. So without further ado, I would like us to basically start this 3 round of questions with our panelists today. And for the first part, we would like to know if the panelists could bring forward the reality of remittance families. That includes both sender and receivers. But the reality that many millions of them have been facing over the month, over the last 11 months in particular, and try to portray with those findings a better understanding on their needs, and therefore some of the solutions to help them increase this resilience that was already demonstrated, but also the resilience of their family. And for this, we are going to link in the second part, in the second question, rounds of question, and third, particularly towards financial inclusion, the access of migrants and their families to financial tools that can give them the financial democracy that we want. So to start, I would like is to give Marina Manke from IOM some views that IOM has been witnessing over the last 11 months in terms of reality that that migrants have faced and their loved ones back home. Marina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Pedro, both for the introduction, very nice words, and also for the invitation. Grateful to be a part of this discussion today, really excited to yet again talk about the topic which has been so high on the discussion and policy agendas of many institutions, policymakers, multiple initiatives. But I fully agree with you that it's so crucial for us to go beyond just, formulating what can be done. We've been working together. Also, eGFRID has been particularly an important stakeholder in mobilizing everybody beyond the topic of remittances and the importance of this type of connectivity between indeed the communities in receiving and sending countries, and because for us it is a way of formulating or the way how human mobility is really expressing itself as a benefit to the societies and to communities. Of course, migrants, their families, but also a benefit to the receiving societies. And that's why for us, when we speak about migration, and in particular in the last months, the impact of COVID and human mobility, we always want to ensure that it's not only the vulnerabilities and risks that we are focusing, but also the potential and opportunities created by human mobilities. So just to be a more positive oriented in our discussions. But indeed, observing the trends, we have really witnessed a lot of daring and troubling examples of how disruptions to economic normality of economic ties, trade relationship, the chains of human mobility which have emerged in the past. We have noticed that this abrupt blockage of movement, of lockdowns, of interruption of business activities immediately put a halt on livelihood, access to really support on financial an income of many families, and of course for those for whom it was just an additional flow, the impact was not so much well pronounced. But those who have been relying on this resource to really ensure that they are not starving, that they are really allowing access to be bare minimal for survival, this is the families and clusters we need to worry about. And that's a particularly sharp short-term impact that we worry about. Indeed, the resilience, what we have seen based on our field presence and feedback, that unlike the prediction of the dire, drop everywhere, in some corridors, the trend has become completely different. So we have seen examples how families, diaspora communities started sending more money to their families back home because they realize that if they don't do it, that the families will be starving. How the other way around, anti-cyclical, anti-directional support from the communities and countries of origin, they started scrapping the final resources because their loved ones were stuck in the destination countries, couldn't pay for accommodation, and have to stop because these migrant workers, particularly, some often in informal situation, could not afford paying for accommodation, could not afford paying for the return ticket, were in informal situation. So the impact has been diverse, but also dire for some specific groups. So what we have seen also, of course, the crisis itself was particularly unprecedented because it really brought interruptions not only in one category of countries but across the whole world. So it's really even the capacities of diaspora to continue supporting also started to really drain down. And also what was particularly dire is really this interruption to ability to travel. We have witnesses changes of migration patterns towards really some migrants stopping to go, not able to engage in the regular temporary mobility. For instance, in the Pacific, Asia Pacific, a lot of migrant families are relying on temporary migrants going into migration to Australia and New Zealand. This is not feasible any longer. So again, those families who are left without income also require some support and attention. And of course, returnees, migrant workers who could not work are coming back. In the Philippines, 100,000 workers coming back. So the impact is immense. What can be done? Again, our key message is inclusion, ensuring that we do not forget that about that category needs attention. And then I'll bring concrete examples at the next round of questions. Concretely, what are the practices we observe? I'll stop here. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Marina. Indeed, there's a lot to say. There's a lot of practices that resulted out of the realities. But I think, as you said, it is important to understand those realities, small aspects like the lack of mobility. What did it engender? And I think this is key. And particularly as we go into the discussion on a lot of this resilience that was showcased could be strengthened. And I think during the second round of questions, we will dig more into those examples. I would like to ask Marie-Chantal, as a representative of a diaspora community in Europe, if you could also bring some of the hardened realities that the diaspora has faced, their needs, and some insights on what was achieved over the last 6 months in spite of this pandemic, and their needs again to contribute to two economies, as we said before. Marie-Chantal, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pedro. I think that Marina has elaborated a little bit more about some of the vulnerabilities, but I want just to go deeper into the reason why this hits hard the diaspora community. This is also linked to some untreated vulnerability from the past years, including the discrimination at workplace. As you may know, the large majority of diaspora and migrant workers can only access the work in less secured sectors where jobs cannot be done remotely, such as construction, hospitality, healthcare, tourism, food, agribusiness, transport, domestic care, etc. And most of them, in the face of discrimination, find no other opportunity than establish their own businesses, and this excludes them to the benefits and the adequate social protection. So, for this reason, while the diaspora and migrant workers were always those who are in the first line to show solidarity, they needed also solidarity from their families who in some cases cannot support in return. So another thing is linked to the mobility aspect that Marina also tackled, but it doesn't equally affect all migrants the same way. For instance, in Italy, some of fresh migrant workers who work in the area of agriculture were not able to move to cities where they can send money, and sometimes they didn't even have the connectivity. And so in the same case, the families in the area in the receiving countries were also affected by the low connectivity for those who doesn't have access to bank or mobile banking or mobile money. So and then plus to those two challenges, there was also the burden of moral frustration. Many diaspora members are isolated members, having their half or even more than the half of their family in the countries of origin. So the mobility was really a very important aspect of their well-being. So being locked down in a country without any way to travel was a big challenge. So there are so many cases of psychological impact of the COVID-19 that are not always spoken. There were also the cases of difficulties for the repatriation of those who were dying in Western countries. Some countries in Africa has established, for instance, some fund to help the repatriation of the family members who were affected by the COVID-19, and others we didn't want to even receive back. So all these challenges affected the migrant worker and diaspora, not only as normal category, but really showed that they are a very vulnerable category that need more attention in the way we address the partner to development. So I will not maybe talk about the way to cope with the resilience. I'll come back on that later, but I wanted really to highlight.
No, thank you so much. It is indeed eye-opening on those realities. It's true that we focus a lot on just that end of remittances sending, but it's what's behind that it's so important. Moreover, this is where the clear linkages with some solutions, some access to certain solutions are so important. But the first one, I think, is in the Remittances Community Task Force Blueprint for Action. The first measure is to ensure that remittances are declared essential service. And if they are, therefore, you could, even with mobility, you could go and send the money. And this, as you know, for many countries is still not a reality. And we are not out of the barn, as the expression says. We are still under the potential shadow of further lockdowns, and in many countries is still a reality. The linkages with remittances and essential services is still not being made. 12 months almost down the road. But thank you for this, and thank you, Marie-Chantal and Marina, for bringing particularly on the sending side the reality of migrants. I would like to go maybe now to the other two speakers and maybe try to give us a perspective on the other side, on the recipients' families. In the case of South Africa or the Southern African cone and Moldova. So maybe I will go to Nikki. If you can give a snapshot of the reality that has been witnessed, particularly if you don't mind, about the senders as well, because this is what you witness as well within this transnational intra-regional flows. But if you can bring that reality, that would be very appreciated.
Yeah.
Nikki.
And we've just heard about 2 hours ago that Eswatini is closing its borders to South Africa. So, there goes some of our borders starting to close again. They say for 14 days. I don't know if that's the first one or the second one. But just to bring together some of the realities of what we've seen. We've spent the last 10 years really focusing on trying to ensure that migrants are able to send money home to their families. We know that this is the lifeblood, and this is what their families need. All of the migrants in South Africa are economic migrants, which means that, and I mean, the implication is that we need to try and keep the flows going through to their families. We have been tracking the data, trying to understand what is happening with remittances from a formal and an informal perspective. So from a formal perspective, we study the balance of payments data out of all the central banks. And then informally, we do some qualitative and quantitative measures to understand what is going on, and then work and open blockages. I think Pedro can confirm that 10 years ago, the South Africa to SADC corridors, there was over 70% was informal. So can you imagine if all the borders were closed with 70% informal, what would have happened? We're now sitting at 30% informal. But if we have a look at what is happening, the value and the volumes of remittances leaving South Africa to go to families in the region has actually increased. It is not dropped, it has increased. When you look at that, you go, wow, that's interesting, what is going on? And we've done a deep dive with some of the service providers, and what is happening is phenomenal, and it's just confirming what you're all saying. The increase is as a result of new people sending money home. So these are new senders coming into the formal environment to send money to their friends and families. Whether these are individuals that previously used informal mechanisms, or whether, as was mentioned earlier, it was people getting together to help families, we're still trying to get into a deep dive of understanding that. But definitely there's been an increase. However, at the bottom end of the pyramid, so the individuals that were sending less than 1,000 Rand, and if I can convert that into dollars, you've got to divide it by 15. So yeah, Pedro, quickly do the maths. It's a very low amount. There was a huge drop. In fact, just about every single person sending less than $1,000, a Rand a month, dropped off. They dropped off the system totally and were not sending money. In 1 month, 60,000 people that were sending money dropped off the system. That makes sense because the migrants are economic migrants. They've come here to earn money. We worked hard with the likes of eGFRID and a lot of our other partners, and we replicated what was happening in South Africa, and I'm sure in a lot of other countries, is that grants were provided to citizens to assist them when they were losing their jobs due to the lockdown. But obviously, it is very difficult for countries to support other countries and to provide some sort of support, short-term relief to those families at the low end. So we created a fund which has been funded by the UK government, and we have literally been able to identify the number, a small number, it's only 5,000 families, it's about 7,000 now families, that every single month we are sending them the money through a grant funding. That's not sustainable, but it is a social security net as well as a G2P type of support for economic migrants, because they're here because their countries can't support them economically. And I think this is something we need to look at and really try and understand that maybe that needs to be something short-term. The lack of environments where these migrants can work is not going to change overnight. And I think that's definitely something that we need to look at. Pedro, I think I'm going to stop there because I can then rattle off.
No, thank you. But you're setting the stage very nicely. Don't worry. And you're right. And what you just mentioned is two schools of thought. I mean, the purpose of these meetings is to try to see how we can get to implementation. There is a recommendation number 11 or measure 11, which is about provide financial support to remittance receiving families. And there's two schools of thoughts here. Some are saying, but these are already the lucky ones that are actually sending money. Why should we help them? Well, I think many economies, and we can attest this by the resolve by many world leaders, putting remittances on top of the agenda on response of COVID-19, just doing that, putting remittances on top, because the lack of it has been felt. So the ramifications of families, and we can attest this for eGFRID, not receiving remittances in rural areas is dramatic, period. And we often say they would not be able to achieve their own SDGs, the SDGs without this fund. So it is not such a crazy idea of having any type of support when families cannot tighten their belts even more than they did, when families that did not send and started sending cannot send even more. that's exactly what you just mentioned. They did send less, but they did send. So why not support this? I think some governments might be very interested in supporting this to continue the stability at economic levels of some of their high migration areas. No, I think it's very relevant what you mentioned.
To say these are families that are not receiving at all. So we only sending to that dropped off totally. So these are the most vulnerable. And you can't talk remittances and digitization and all of these good things if there's such vulnerability that they're not getting the funding anyway. So these are families that received nothing for at least 3 months, which is
definitely. No, we can think about the conditional cash transfer mechanism that here could jump in and put a box to be ticked in this regard, to put this category. Thank you, Nikki, for this. Maybe I would like to go to Alina, to the example of Moldova, the realities. This is a country that, as Alina will mention, is very and highly depending on remittances, has been greatly affected by this. So I don't know if Alina, if you could share with us some of the realities that have been witnessed over the 11-month period.
Oh, thank you, Pedro, very much. So probably I would first present you some general data to understand better the receiver part. So that the Moldova is really depending a lot on remittances. Just a very general number to understand where we are. So 60% of our remittances so the remittances part in relation to the GDP is about 60%, which is placing Moldova in one of the first places in Central and Eastern Europe. So at least one of each family member. So in a family, at least one member is abroad, working abroad and helping its family. So we are really depending on remittances. 60% of all our population lives in rural area. And numbers are showing that about 30% of all the remittances that are coming into our country are not official, were not official. So they were receiving in informal ways, which is a very important and huge number to be mentioned and analyzed. Now with the COVID part, with the COVID pandemic, what we have seen is that somewhere in summertime, the remittances were decreasing because of this 30% of informal that had been limited by travel limits that had happened. But what we are seeing now is that the remittances had started to grow in the statistical official number. It doesn't mean that we receive more money in the country. It means that it is just switched on the formal side, which is a very good maybe indicator from our part and from our project point of view. And also what I want to say from the receiving point part of the side of the population. So most of the people that send money, like 50% are parents that sending money to their kids, and or spouses sending money to their husband and wives. Now, what they do with this money, with this pandemic situation, we have seen that they started to keep more and not invest it. They don't know what will be in the future. And this uncertainty, they make people just save money for a better time, not invest it. And this is slowing down the economy from one side, yes, from point of view of investment and businesses. However, about 15% try to invest them, but they have been very careful in this. To understand, because these are people from rural areas, they are not so much as being qualified as clients for the banks to take a credit. So they should base either on remittances or on their money that had been saved. And here is a huge, what we should work more here as a general idea is how to increase the other alternatives for receiving a credit or just to be combined with the remittance part, to help them invest and support them in investing in a small agriculture rural part of the businesses of their businesses. What is also important is that majority of the respondents that we have analyzed had mentioned that at least 1 to 2 persons are benefiting from money in Moldova. So the remittance is very important, extremely important for our economy, first thing. Second of all is that we should think and work more on how to formalize the remittance part. And third, the most important part is how to help people in rural areas to invest and help them invest in their businesses. So to invest in income generating businesses, so that they will not depend on so much on remittances. So to try to help to develop our economy in rural areas.
No, thank you so much, Alina, for that. I mean, it's spot on what you're mentioning, and everything is guiding us to the key point. The blueprint for action has a name. It's response, recovery, and resilience, in that order. And I think in response, we just needed to have more information on the recovery. Many of them have took this into their own hands, without wanting to make a spoiler alert on the upcoming meeting that's going to be moderated by Leon, that I believe is also in this meeting. We're going to see as well the uptake on mobile remittances, and as Nikki was saying, there's been a switch. And this is what basically has contradicted some of the figures that we were all thinking. Through normal patterns, yes, through the segments that we looked at, the 20% reduction or more, and that has become, well, different with time as we got to know more that there's been this switch, there's been a migration towards digital tools. And I would let our colleagues on the next session and Leon to elaborate more on that from the private sector perspective. But for the consumer himself, this switch has happened, and that informality is actually very good news, because that change is bringing many other options, I think, and can really lead to some of the round 2 that I would like to start here is about financial democracy, having more options to use or send your funds. And this is what millions of migrants and their families are lacking, and particularly in rural areas, as you mentioned very well, Alina. So I would like is to go back to the speakers in relation to building this options. We've seen that this has been the first response from millions of migrants, as well as their receiving families, to change. The money needs to be there. I need to normally very reluctant to change. The resilience took over, and many went into new ways of sending, and also of receiving. And this brings a whole package of opportunities. And I think, how can we scale that up? So maybe I would like on this round is to go through some examples of that, drastic changes that were not being able to be put in place over now, I know, at least 2 decades, and suddenly in a space of a couple of months, these switches have happened. Marina, I was wondering from IOM if you could share some of these changes, these best practices that you believe could be hopefully replicated, but that give us the good example on the personal response that migrants and families have and recipients have had in terms of remittances.
Thank you, Pedro. It was just fascinating to hear other speakers reinforcing some of the messages, ideas, and Nikki, you're spot on really, and that was what I was trying to do. It was generically identifying those categories, cohorts of beneficiaries who are particularly hit and cut out from this support, livelihood support access today. These are the ones we need to really target, and these are the ones where we need to mobilize development cooperation partners and say, yes, it's not efficient, it's not long-term, but this is kind of going to humanitarian support, saving lives agenda. And then, of course, Pedro, thinking about scaling up, and as we were preparing for this discussion yesterday, I kept on thinking, you know, why do we keep on repeating things and going into different countries and then testing, and then you kept on referring to some of the approaches and models which we have been discussing in the past. But what is preventing us from really scaling up? Maybe I'll have that idea for the third round of questions, but let me go through some sort of very quick things which we tested out or we are aware about. Again, we are not a financial specialized organization. We focus on mobility, on migration governance, and we, of course, closest to the migrant families. So I think the first thing which is absolutely crucial, and I think we need to continue advocating, is for having regular, rigorous, comprehensive analysis and studies and surveys. Not just macro data from balance of payments, but really analysis, what Alina was referring to, what Nikki was speaking about, because that allows us to really understand our beneficiaries, migrants or their families, as potential customers. So we can start going into either designing separate financial products or working on bringing migrants and our beneficiaries within the existing financial products in the specific community. So what we have done, the latest report from Bangladesh is definitely something worth scaling up and really comparing into different, in different contexts. We analyze behavior of remittance recipients across time. What has happened maybe 5-10 years ago, and what's the situation now. We identify different diverse patterns based on whether this is a female member of household who is the decision maker, or father-in-law, based on the education, and that allows us again to start targeting those families better. So absolutely, definitely need to strengthen research and studies, and then again become more efficient there. So the second one is, how do we work in improving the efficiency of the financial markets themselves? And of course, the issue of transparency is one. But another one is what you call the democracy, I would call market competition, you know, so that the customers can really decide which channel to send. And availability of channels, of course, is going to similarly drive the costs of the channels down. So what are we doing? I know, Pedro, you're not in agreement on cost comparison platforms. We still believe in trying to promote different places where information is available on what is the cheapest way, and promoting availability of information. We, for instance, have MIGAP as one approach in Latin America that is becoming really a platform for us to communicate with migrants. We know the Safe Asia, ILO is doing work. So really bringing those platforms, digital platforms of information, working with our migrant families as customers to ensure that they have all information at hand. And of course, existing infrastructures in the markets. Of course, we will hear from Alina the work in Moldova, but remember, and I know eGFRID and also us, we started testing out the capacities of post offices as additional structures which are already there existing, how to ensure that the postal offices also are capacitated and really empowered to offer remittance transfer opportunities. Of course, the digital markets will do their work as well, mobile markets and whatnot. But again, that's what we, for instance, have partnered with Universal Postal Union in Burundi, and we are looking into replicating and really comparing this experience. And the final one, maybe what is good is, of course, financial literacy. We are doing directly developing financial literacy trainings to migrant and family beneficiaries. The latest one, again, in Bangladesh, following our survey, we are developing one. In Nepal, we also have developed a package. Are they sustainable? I think we need to continue going back to those experiences. We worked with, again, eGFRID in Nepal together. We need to go back, what we have done. We work together with government partners. What is happening with those tools? What is happening with those approaches? Let me stop here. I'll come back maybe with some recommendations at the next round. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. If I might say, on the cost, it's not that we disagree. It's just that on the cost, there's the platforms, of course, that do that. But the cost alone on transparency doesn't do the trick. And the issue that we've seen since the cost has been raised, because remittances came into the global audience because of the cost back in 2004, when the G8 decided to take it up. So, and it's always an average cost. That's what was the interest. And it's true that for some of the migrants in France to country X and that corridor, they only care about that cost and not the cost of sending it in general to Africa. And that might not drive all the changes that are needed in the market. So cost absolutely drives the agenda, but we need to go beyond that. And I think we're going to hear that as well from our colleagues on the private sector to understand more the market dynamics and how actually the information, transparency being one of the measures that has been key in the blueprint, not only for the customer to make a better choice, as you said very well, but also for the competition, right? To see if the market is competitive, if there's still some opportunities to make a buck on top of that, which we know leads to benefits to the migrants. So thank you so much, Marina, for that. And then we will go to the recommendations. And thank you for sharing some examples. I want to say that there's already questions in the chat asking for, can we get more details on this, and that? Each speaker will also provide links and information that we will post in this platform or on the summary of this event, so you will be able to go and get to know more about the examples that the speakers are presented to us. The same thing for IFAD. There's a lot of examples that we would like to share on projects that worked, others that didn't. And we will actually share one in the next few minutes. But these are things that it's worth sharing in terms of what are the limitations, as you say very well, Marina. Are they sustainable or not? Well, it's important. Are there a stepping stone towards something else, to a market change? And a lot of the pilots around remittances are in that. So thank you so much for this. I know that, Nikki, you also have a lot of examples. Finmark has been working a lot in that part of the region. You found you actually been very active in specific markets and with specific actors. Maybe you could share also some examples right now, concrete examples of what you have identified, seen that could basically become part of this guidance to implementation of this measures. Nikki,
Definitely.
you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you, Pedro. I think the first thing that we all need to acknowledge is that this remittance journey is a journey. So I think it's going to be quite hard to just change everything overnight as it stands now. And you mentioned 2004. We've been doing this since 2002. It's not easy. It actually isn't easy because of all the players, because of some of the regulatory environments, and you need to put it all together. But what has happened and what has been very successful is that we sort of split it quite simply into first addressing some of the first mile issues, then looking at some of the last mile issues, and then of course there's these migrants that really fell off that we identified. From a first mile perspective, the journey, which we now actually have the opportunity to accelerate, was around KYC. I mean, one of the biggest barriers to getting migrants to using formal services is KYC. And it's not about becoming KYC'd. It's about the dignity of when I go and do it. It's about where do I do it. It's about how am I dealt with. And the initial work that all of you would have done and know about is that you used rules-based to make it easier to get migrants into formal financial services by reducing the barriers. We've now moved into a risk-based environment, and it was very interesting. We have found, and we were very scared, that when we moved into a risk-based environment, most of the service providers, the financial service providers, would de-risk. And when they de-risked, they would make it harder for migrants to get access. And with that in mind, we actually worked in a sandbox environment with our regulators in South Africa and with 3 ADLers and 2 banks to develop a framework for implementing risk-based KYC for low-value cross-border remittances, as well as for low-value bank accounts. And there are very, very, very successful examples that we have. We have an organized, am I allowed to mention the financial service providers?
Mention the best one. The other ones, you will put it in the links. But yes, please do. I think we all want to concrete.
There's a few of them, but one of the financial service providers we've worked with is Makuru, that you may all know. They have adopted this risk-based approach to really onboard and ensure that the migrants can quickly and easily get into sending low values. They have a solution which allows for non-face-to-face onboarding for low values, and once they reach a threshold, they have to properly, move into formal KYC or full KYC. And some of the findings have been amazing. I mean, they were saying that a large percentage of those that came in this manner eventually wanted to be fully KYC'd. And I think it's human nature. They wanted to touch and see. Already they're migrants, they're feeling vulnerable. If you can bring them in a reasonably easy way, it makes it a lot easier. We are now really going to place a lot of focus, because we're a net sending country, on reviewing and assessing how risk-based has been implemented by all of the financial service providers in South Africa. Now, risk-based is a choice, so the financial service providers choose how they implement it, but we're going to try and understand and see who've been able to implement and adopt the framework versus who hasn't, to see if there isn't more work we can do to really offer more options. So that was on the first mile, and that was very, very successful. The other thing that happened, and this happened about 3 years ago, so again, the journey that we're talking about, and we're talking about savings now, we developed mobile money guidelines for the SADC region, which was adopted by the Committee of Central Bank Governors, which specifically allows for interest to be paid on mobile money wallets. So it's not on the bank account, it's on the individual wallet, which is very controversial. It's a non-deposit taking environment, but to support financial inclusion, the Committee of Central Bank Governors felt this was very important. Now, while it's adopted as a regional initiative, the individual countries need to decide if they're going to do it. Malawi is actually the first country that have done it and have already paid 2 tranches of interest to their mobile money wallets. And then we now need to join the dots, digitize in South Africa, digitize all the way through, digitize into that wallet, and hopefully keep a store of value in the wallet. And that is the next process that we're now starting to really, we're assessing again and seeing if we can't go into countries and get them to adopt to pay interest on these wallets, so that we're starting to give, as you say, some sort of financial liberation, that I may have a wallet, but that doesn't mean it's a lesser product. I know there's a strong view, it's not a bank product, it's a lesser product. Nonsense, it's a wallet. It can give you some sort of financial liberation. And if we start with the interest, we're moving in the right direction. So they are the 2 examples and some of the stuff that's being done.
Thank you. And I think, again, without trying to do a spoiling alert, for the session on track 2, session 1, next week, our colleagues are from GSMA also, and the images are going to touch upon this, and all these aspects that can really change. I think it was key what you said. Now we are in a risk-based environment, because that has changed the deal a lot. We see the benefits that, supporting the private sector in adapting for a better customer due diligence, CDD, the impact that this could have. We really believe on that. I think this will be also a discussion point next time. But thank you for that particular aspect, because we need to understand that, again, that we had changed. I always like to refer to the reality, not 20 years ago, but already in the 90s. Many European countries were facing what millions of migrants are facing today. They had their, they were sending money to their loved ones. And a lot was learned, but unfortunately a lot was unlearned since then. But one lesson that is still today, because these financial institutions are still making, they're big institutions, they're still making a lot of money, is that they benefited from citizens abroad that wanted to send these remittances. And they just added 1 + 1 and realized that this could be part of their client base. With their graduation, let's say, economic graduation, many of these migrants would like to return home, and they will need other services. So, and this has been proven, I can talk for Spain, Italy, and Portugal, for instance, it did work. So some of these examples, unfortunately, sometimes are lost. But thanks, Nikki. I would like to ask Alina if maybe we could actually put the video of what our institution has been doing, and it's I think an example that really brings together the reality of COVID, the reality that migrants and recipients have been facing, and how the linkage with financial services becomes a good example that if scaled properly can lead to really to the main aspect that we're thinking about, resilience. Alina, would you allow me to put it on, and then maybe you can comment on it after it?
Yes, please. I was just wanting to ask you to do this. If you could do this, and then I will continue.
Then I will ask the Secretariat then to put it on.
The lavender harvest has just ended in Moldova, but this year has been extra tough for farmers like Valeriu Ciorba. For the last 3 years, the 40-year-old farmer has been working these fields, earning a living by growing lavender. But a drought, a global pandemic, and the subsequent drop in money sent by family members working abroad have taken a toll on his business. In spring, when COVID-19 hit, it was difficult to farm because companies were closed and fuel and agricultural supplies were scarce. Lack of buyers had sales plummet.
După părerea noastră și ceea ce vedem discutând cu clienții noștri, pandemia de COVID din acest an a lovit destul de dur în puterea de cumpărare. O mare parte din lume se limitează în a procura doar strictul necesar. Referitor la remitențe, credem noi că și cei aflați peste hotare, datorită pandemiei, au mai puțin de lucru, se mai închid unele instituții, este mai puțin de lucru și respectiv bani vin mai puțin și bani care ar fi disponibili pentru a fi trimiși acasă, iarăși sunt destul de puțini.
When Valeriu first started his lavender business back in 2017, he did not have enough money to buy seeds, so he turned to remittances from relatives and friends abroad.
Este un colac de salvare aceste remitențe pentru noi în momentele dificile pentru noi, ele ne salvează destul de mult. Pentru a porni o afacere sau face unele investiții la nivel de personal în Moldova este nevoie de o sumă mare de bani.
Valeriu is one of over 1 million people in Moldova who rely on remittances. For some of these people, it can make up to half of their income. Remittances are a very important inflow for Moldova, especially for families and small businesses. In 2019, they represented 16% of the country's GDP.
În situația anului 2020, când pandemia a cuprins nu numai Moldova, dar toată lumea, o bună parte din populație au rămas fără venituri. Și îndeosebi în agricultură, care pentru anul 2020 este destul de greu, că nu numai pandemie, dar s-a abătut asupra populației și o secetă colosală, care oamenii au mari pierderi.
Accessing remittance services is usually challenging for rural families, and COVID-19 has made this situation even harder. In 2020, a project funded by the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or IFAD, and implemented by the Moldova's National Commission for the Financial Market, enabled farmers to receive remittances through local savings and credit associations known as SCAs. This new remittance service is particularly convenient for farmers like Valeriu who live in remote areas and cannot afford to take time out from work to travel to big cities to access funds. In addition, SCAs can now use remittances as a reliable collateral so that farmers have the necessary guarantee to obtain a loan. These services allow farmers like Valeriu to keep their businesses afloat.
Cunoaștem cu toții că pentru întreprinzători din agricultură, guvernul a acordat careva subvenții, însă ele sunt destul de mici, însă sunt o bună parte din clienții noștri asociații care nu au întreprindere deschisă. La noi de la bun început împrumuturile adică sunt diferite, pentru angajații în agricultură sunt cu un procent mai mic.
To counter climate change effects, improved access to finance is key to helping small farmers like Valeriu recover from shocks in the medium to long term. By promoting better access to remittances and remittance-backed loans, IFAD supports rural people's resilience and ultimately support their businesses' growth.
Thank you. Valeria, sorry, Alina. Valeria had a connection, so go ahead.
This is so nice to see that under our project we could do such a great activity and result by helping people in rural area to receive remittances and then to benefit from other financial services. So considering that we are having here a lot of participants in our conference, probably I would better try to be very useful, to explain the background of our project, to understand what we have, to share our experience in our already feasible results. So first,
could I ask you, since if we could start already a sort of round 3 with
okay.
you first, so if you can bring also the challenges and
okay.
what you think were key in order to bring this to a next level, you know, of implementation. That I think would be great, and then we continue basically around this third.
Okay.
So
if you remember, so first of all, to explain, we were working on trying to find the way how to channel the remittances through more formal ways. And so that people in rural areas could also benefit and increase their incomes through remittances and other financial services. So that was the key issue at the beginning. But to mention and to know, that was 2018, when there was no idea of COVID and pandemic and any crisis possible. So our project started to, we're already 2 years of implementation, but with this COVID year, it was a little of more long implementation of this project. So we are now in the middle of implementing of this project. Where we are now? So what were our challenges and where we are now? First of all, what was important, there were two main key issues, is to find the correct legislation, how to connect our credit unions, or how we call it in Moldova, savings and credit associations, which are not-for-profit institutions, but which is the most representative financial institutions in Moldova, having a very huge network in rural area, and how to connect these institutions, financial institutions, with the rapid transfer institutions that we have seen from our pre-results. We have seen that about 50% of all the money that come into Moldova, they come through these rapid transfer institutions, which are like Western Money, Gram, and other RIA, and others. So here was a key issue to find this first legal correct implementation of this. Second is the infrastructure technical connection, which also required consultations, money investment, and the understanding of how to match this legislation with technical. So this was maybe the key, maybe most complicated steps what we have managed already to do. So just a few words of our reality. So in Moldova, we are having 64 B licensed SCAs. These are SCAs or credit unions that are big SCAs, which are allowed to attract savings which are prudentially in compliance with all international requirements, but which were not part of the international payment system. So they were not allowed to make any transfers, or they are not having its own bank like accounts for clients separate, like in the banking industry. So, but which had a huge social impact. The number of the clients are like 10% of the population are members of our credit unions, and basically these are all in rural areas. So here were the biggest advantage that we had, and we wanted to value this. The services that were allowed to credit unions is just to receive savings and to provide credits, not more. What we have done during the first part of our project implementation is that we had analyzed who are the potential payment service providers, non-banking payment providers that will be able to connect, to make our credit unions as an agent. So from our result and what we have done already, and we were lucky to have not banking industry, not post office, that were not so available in connection of credit unions to this system, because they were kind of competitors. But we had these money payment providers that were licensed by the central bank, that were also allowed to, they have a license also allowing to have this electronic money and wallet money. And also they were allowed to connect to these rapid transfer systems. And our credit unions became as an agent, passing through all the steps. Like I can just name few of them to understand how long path they had passed through. Is the first one is to receive the approval from the regulator, which is the NCFM, and then to receive the approval of the central bank, and then to receive approval of these some of the rapid payment transfer systems that individually analyzed each SCA as an agent of this payment provider. So as of now, we are having half of our SCAs, 35 of them, sorry, that are legally absolutely entitled and fully operational recently, fully operational to make this rapid transfer systems, and now they're allowed to receive remittances through this system, which we consider as a huge result. That was recently in September, we are having all 35 SCAs connected to this rapid transfer system through this licensed official payment provider. What was the biggest challenge?
I will ask you to conclude because we're running out of time, Alina.
Okay, sorry.
So
yes,
and I want to give
what are the lessons learned here? The cooperation between regulators and understanding from the governmental point of view of the importance of having an alternative to receive money and to have an alternative to receive finance and financial services is the key issue. My job as a project manager here in Moldova was to convince and to explain to the regulators around and other key partners that in fact we could do this, and and to find a legal path to do this, and also to explain that that just let us mitigate and see where the potential financial and operational risk could exist, and to try to adjust our regulations here in order to capture and to mitigate the potential risk. And then with the COVID, that was now, it is extremely just-in-time connection and opportunity for the people that were not being able to travel and to send money through buses, for instance, or to friends, to make this through our credit unions. So that was one of the issues. And if you allow just the second note, is that the financial literacy. The people don't really understand where they go when they receive money. And what was important now is to explain that if you go, for instance, to a credit union, you could also benefit from this receiving of through this rapid transfer, and then you could also benefit from other financial services that this credit union could offer you. And here we are now with our project to try to enhance people, to explain them what are the opportunities. We can hear you, Pedro.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for that. I just want to say to the audience that we're putting also link and information on this lessons learned. The idea now is to share. We're not going to provide a full guidelines, but I think what is key in your message is that there's, as it was said also by Nikki, is the several ingredients that are needed. And however, even just with few, we can already achieve results. And I think this is the very positive message that need here. But as you mentioned on the regulators, that is key. And I would like your last point then to allow me to transition to Marie-Chantal. I am very mindful of the time, but you did mention financial literacy and education. This is something that we know to be extremely important. Without it, all of this sort of fail. The right choices cannot be made. So toward the right choices, the education and understanding needs to precede. So this is very important. And I was wondering if Marie-Chantal can give us also some points on this, on the recommendations, how she see this from the perspective of migrants themselves. Going into the future, and particularly if you could highlight on their need for financial literacy and uptake of financial services overall. Marie?
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. I think that there is a need beside the securing the migrant workers, but also there is a need to educate them on financial issues. And beside also there is the fact that the money transfer market have been always a monopolistic market, and the issue of the cost is not yet gone. We still need to walk the talk on what has been committed. I don't think that with the current trend, we are going to meet the 3% SDG target. So this is a reality that needs to still live. And then I think that there is it is very important also to open up for technology and creativity and enable people, the young people, especially in the migrant side and diaspora side, to come up with innovation. They know more what they need, and then those innovations can alleviate all problem of connectivity and lack of access to financial product and any other challenges that COVID-19 have shown.
Thank you for that. Do you find in terms of the families back home of migrants, the relationship between the financial capability, and by that I mean their ability to and desire to acquire, financial services for their families back home or themselves. Is this something that you feel among the diaspora being present as a service that is needed or not? Because I know that many diasporas do face that issue, being abroad and then not having the right services at home, because the question oftentimes being, well, who are you? You're not even here. Do you face that point from the diaspora that you engage and represent?
I do think that the access to financial products, access to connectivity goes also with the level of development. So each diaspora member face it in different way. And I think that in Africa, for instance, what is working more is not the the traditional financial services, it is more mobile banking. So we need to go to adapt also the tools to what is needed and what is achievable with regard to the context of receiving and sending communities.
Thank you, and I think again a lot of this will be exposed next week on this. I know that we're opening a lot of discussion points. The good thing is this is not a one-time event. We're going to be discussing these issues from different angles. Today it is about from remittance families, from the private sector next week, and as well as regulators. And for session 2, we'll expect to dig on this. Before I go to Nikki and Marina, I know that we only have 7 minutes left. There's been a lot of questions in the chat, and we're going to try to address potentially 1 or 2 if we can. Otherwise, I just want to reassure that many that although we are providing some of the feedback in the chat, we are also going to post some of the answers to these questions and ask the participants to kindly do that, so no question goes unanswered. So I will give the floor to Nikki, and I'll take the opportunity to also drop a question on you, Nikki. Aside the recommendation, there's a question on how much was assigned to migrants in the example that you mentioned. And if you can, of course, promote further information in the feedback that we're going to post, and how much did it cost the governments to put this up? This is in reference to this the support mechanisms that you mentioned. It also asks what is the cost benefit of this type of effort? Probably in Europe, Portugal is one of the countries where specific measures directed to migrants were seen. Is this really costly for host countries? That's an open question. If you want to address part of it briefly, please be I guess. If you want to do it then on the website, it's your choice. So I will leave it to you to decide, but overall it is on the time of the recommendations and the main challenges to implementations of what we've discussed today. How do you see it, Nikki? You have the floor.
Okay, so do you want me to focus it on just that migrant remittance fund at this stage? Those 2 questions, Peter?
Yeah, I did put a problem for you. I know, I'm sorry. Maybe on the recommendations, the questions we can always answer because these are detailed questions. And I think we would like to hear from you is on these challenges. We're trying to find a solution to implement many of this, and therefore we need to identify these challenges.
So I think that, I mean, as I say, the elephant is in the room is the one challenge will be that migrants are generally informal workers. And this is where I'm sure that the IOM can help and help us and how we can really ensure that they benefit. But the other challenges are some of the same old that we just need to push the envelope on. And that is really getting working groups, as Alina said, you know, managing between all of the providers and the regulators and what can we do and what can't we do to really see how much we can digitize and move migrants into a digital footprint. I've always had the view that remittances are that Trojan horse into formal financial services. And if we can really, I mean, I've been saying it for about 8 years, this is a Trojan horse into formal financial services. And if we can start getting digital footprints, understanding, you know, what migrants are doing. I keep saying to our remittance provider guys, you know how much everyone is sending every single month. Surely you can develop credit algorithms. Surely there's some sort of insurance you can add to it. Surely, but I think we've been so focused on, well, let's just get the remittance there. Okay, now the remittance is there. Now, what else do we need to do? Instead of trying to understand that Trojan horse principle and how we can move everyone through. I hope that's answered your question. On the other one, I can send you lots of documentation on how that was done. The challenges that we had in launching the Migrant Fund was quite large, but we got it out. We got it out.
Worth the effort. No, thank you for that. And again, we will post this. And thank you for your comment. We're absolutely level in terms of understanding on the potential of remittances. Cost is just one thing. The real potential for remittances, undeniably, has been it's spearheading financial inclusion, spearheading all the benefits of digitalization. And we don't need proof of that because it happened before. As I was explaining on the linkage with the financial services, commercial banks in Europe basically brought their migrants on board thanks to remittances services that were requested. And they started with that. And then they basically got all the onboarding they needed. In some of the countries like my own in Portugal, they helped a lot the economy and actually helped to reach the economic status that was needed back then just to join the EU. So my point is that the impact at the local level that the community, the remittances community, right? I mean, the families can have is enormous. And this is something that has been proven now for over 30 years. It could greatly affect and it could greatly support the economies back home. And I know that we're going into also a terrain, Marina, for you here, because you've been advocating a lot for the role, particularly the linkage between migration and development. And for a very long time, this has not really been perceived like this. And I think remittances and this contribution from economic contribution for migrants really builds for this. So I don't know if you have some of the recommendations on this very difficult task that IOM has in between bridging this two dialogues of migration and all the other connotations that this could have, and the development potential. So as where we are now in 2021, amidst the crisis, the benefits have been shown. What could be the take-home messages to start this implementation of this notion for governments, policies, both on sending and receiving side? I don't know if it's a long question for you, Marina. Would you mind send us your thoughts on that? Share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Pedro, I'm also so sorry that we actually are not giving the audience an opportunity to ask the questions.
I know, we will.
And that's why I don't want to talk much, because lots of things, ideas have been really shared today, and there will be follow-up meetings. Maybe my key message remains the same as I have been advocating. So we need to be better in clustering things. We need to be able to bring those examples, not as a standalone initiative. I have not heard about what Alina is doing. I have not heard about what Nikki is doing, but immediately my reaction was, wow, but we are working on migration, on specific programs in the same countries. With Zimbabwe, we have a project where we are trying to really mobilize national stakeholders towards an approach on remittances. How can we be better in really whatever we are doing now in specific context? I know that our team in Moldova has been working on the topic of remittances and financial inclusion, migration development for decades. How can we really complement and scale up and really so that bring those initiatives together? Because migration, what is great seeing is that migration is becoming indeed not just a security agenda. It's not about the status. Status is important, Nikki, absolutely. So if it's informality, we can speak about whatnot. But if there's no papers, no document, you can't open an account, whatnot. But now migration is an agenda of stakeholders like labor institutions there, but also central banks, also ministries of finance, also investment agencies. We need to continue bringing again everybody together. I know it's always about partnership and collaboration, but there's so much impact we can achieve by just clustering, by just following up on today's discussion. So, okay, that's South Africa, and me bringing our specialists together and really creating these communities of sharing expertise, because then we are really delivering on tapping into comparative advantage and knowledge and know-how of financial institutions. Because, yes, remittances is a part of our agenda, but we are not financial experts. Financial experts don't understand about legal status. So all these gaps and efficiencies of information gaps, which we need to focus on top of all the other initiatives. So it's an easy fix, I think, and let's focus on that in 2021. And you're doing great with this initiative, with the blueprint. There are several of them, but I think that's when we start creating an impact on the ground.
Marina, thank you so much on that. As you know, the idea of these eGFRIDs is to address this frustration that I think both IOM and IFAD has been feeling. We know these connections, but it cannot be done during one event or one GFRID or one GFMD alone, because there's so many topics. And you are here today, and we made sure of that. So again, absolutely, this is a recommendation again that also came into the blueprint for action, is to develop, promote this targeted incentives about dialogue across sector. Absolutely. I know that we are over time, but I would like is to put some of the questions. There was a question for you, Marina, on the impact relative to remittances and migration in rural areas versus rural areas, urban to rural, sorry. This is something very close to our heart. I don't know if you want to answer that, or if you want us to do a joint question in written, but I think it would be nice for IOM to showcase the importance of rural. It's better for you to say it than me.
I mean, that's absolutely, we need better data. We need more refined and granular data. And we have some surveys. Have we asked this question? I'm not sure, but we can share definitely links to the studies we have started coming up with. And definitely we have just published together a report with the World WF food program in terms of the impact on the agriculture and general nutrition, and I mean, let's collect those links, but we can only deduce that, of course, the impact, if they are particularly excluded from the remittance recipient, particularly struggling in normal times, then of course they will be particularly hurt, the way how Nikki explained. If they are particularly vulnerable, then and if they've been relying on primarily informal flows, particularly, they will be particularly hit, of course. But again, I will share the links, Pedro.
Perfect. And again, I think from IFAD we can attest to that. I mean, rural areas is the main area where we work, and we can see on the impact. We monitor in some countries, particularly in Mali, and the drastic reduction of remittances during some months had tremendous consequences. Because again, there's an entire economy depending on that. It is not just the families that are benefiting that, but the remittance family that receive this, using this to buy seeds and so on, and there's those that produce them. So there's an entire micro ecosystem around these remittances that suddenly stops functioning as well, not having any relation whatsoever with migrants. So this is extremely important. I will still continue. I know that some might have to leave, but I will just be bold and continue on the questions. There's a question on the sustainable initiatives versus attending the crisis initiative. This is something that came twice. I think it's very important. And I think maybe it refers to you, Nikki, saying that in drastic times like this, sometimes it's not about the sustainability, but it's about the action. So there's a call for humanitarian aid being needed as it helps restore resilience. And we saw this during the last month. So I don't know if anyone would like to express their thoughts in this, the importance of humanitarian and the linkage between sustainable initiatives and not, particularly in times of crisis. I know that IOM, you do have some views on that, but Nikki, but I don't know. Maybe Nikki and Marina, if you want to mention something on this, if there's any evidence of other initiatives like this.
So, I mean, the humanitarian aid is what we were trying to do with this migrant relief fund, which is short term, and we don't believe it is sustainable over the long term. You know, I just don't think it would be sustainable. But if we don't help people over the bumpy, very difficult times, I'm not sure,
we're going to spend more trying to fix it in a sustainable manner later on.
You can't. So, because all that's going to happen is we're going to move, as we discussed earlier, that small granular portion into a more crisis environment. And, that starts to become organic and, you start having this ecosystem and it's going to impact a whole lot of other things. So, yeah, it means a lot of money. Someone asked, it was $15 a month per family that was identified that had dropped off. And it was for a period, it was extended, it's just over 6 months, and we're hoping to extend it further and to more families.
Right. If I may connect the dots, governments, and this is just a personal opinion, governments would not see this benefiting if they believe that remittances are just for consumption, color TVs, better shoes, better Nike shoes. They will say, well, people can live without that. Now, when there's a reality hit that showcases the impact that this has in the economies beyond consumption, then it becomes a lot of sense. So again, I think the point that Marina had made, and you, and actually all of you, about further information. Yes, it means more studies. Yes, it means more surveys. Yes, it means understanding better the customers and the citizens. Indeed, because that reality can be not only life-changing, but economically, but for the family. So very good point on that. Maybe I would like to go on last point that we received. Some of the regulatory changes don't need to be from point A to Z in one go, but can be gradual, as mentioned by Nikki. Do other speakers know any of this kind of step initiatives? In other words, small changes that can make a difference. Maybe Marie Chantal, as a representative of diaspora, I would like to go with maybe the final word with you. What do you think a small change like this could have a long-lasting effect, maybe on how diasporas and their families behave or perceived? Do you have any examples of this, of a small change that is inspiring and long-lasting?
Thank you, Pedro. I think that, and excuse me that maybe I keep focusing on it, but that is just for how important it is.
Go ahead.
The first change is really linked to the regulatory framework, both in the host countries and home countries. And this is where we as diaspora cannot act. So we need to voice that concern very frequently through any channel possible, because without a friendly framework, there will be no way to proceed. Secondly, I think that during and in the post-COVID, if the COVID will ever leave us, we need really to protect the migrant and diaspora workers in the workplaces, because this is the essential element of the remittances flowing. So if we cannot have income, there is no remittances we can speak about. So I think those are the two areas where I think it is very important to bring change, to make sure that we are having a long-lasting effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Marie Chantal. There's actually a question on this, but we're really over time. And I'm suggesting is that we are going to post all the questions as well. I don't want any questions to go unanswered. I think you would agree with me, and then give it a shot. This also would influence the next session of this track 1. And maybe for the discussions that we are aim already for February, particularly for Africa, we can bring back some of these questions. So as a good incentive to keep contributing with your thoughts for both participants and speakers. Give us a couple of days. So the speakers that have been very kind today in sharing their time with us to put their thoughts together as well in answering these questions. But no gray matter will be wasted on this over time. But I still want to thank you so much for all the participants and for the speakers for leading this first track. As I mentioned, there's 3 of them. There's several sessions, and we intend to continue this until we all, as Marina said very well, get to a more comfortable place in understanding all the all the ramifications and all this type of stakeholders that we can connect to, leading to the global forum and beyond, and connect also with other agendas. So we're very excited about this. And again, we wanted to thank you so much for this first meeting that we had for 2021, and I hope that the remaining ones will be as successful. Thank you so much for this. Please do register for the upcoming ones next week. You will receive the link once you register, so do not hesitate. We will be the private sector and the enabling environment, and we will touch upon some of the issues that were addressed today. So I don't know if there's a final word really from our speakers. I would like to have them say the last word.
Just thank you for everybody.
Okay.
It was great being here, I think. Staying in touch.
Thank you so much, Marina, Lina, Nicky, Marie Chantal, but also all the participants here present. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Everybody stay healthy, please. Cheers.
Yes, be safe. Thank you all.